Good afternoon, everyone. Live from Silicon Valley, California. This is Success Sadhana. My name is JM, and I welcome you all to a program today where we continue our ongoing series, Inner Harmony. Today is session 5, Bhakti Yoga, Cultivating Devotion and Love. With our speaker today, Vaish, a veteran Bhakti yogi, author, and monk. We have around 28 members on Zoom, and I think close to 50 members on Facebook logged in. And thanks so much, Vaish. I know you are traveling. You are in Toronto right now on a spiritual tour, but thank you so much for accommodating at this time and still coming online to encourage us.
I'm not really accommodating. I miss all of you. And I'm always counting the moments. Travel. Yeah, it's true. I'm traveling. You can look it up in the etymological dictionary. The word travel comes from the word travail. And if you keep tracing it back, travail comes from an instrument of torture. It's kind of a whip, people. Anyway, won't get into that, but it was an interesting journey. It took us a couple, 2.5 days to get here because of canceled flights and so forth. But we learned a lot along the way. Interesting encounters with people in the airport lounges and so forth. Kindred souls stranded at an airport for 2 days together. And just the oasis of that I'm experiencing here in Toronto. There's a spiritual community up here. They're so welcoming. And although we got in last night at 3 a.m., it's a lively place, and people get started here at around 4, so there's been no lack of activity. But I've been looking forward to this coming back. I really appreciate the topic, which is about inner harmony. It's cliche kind of to say that, isn't it? I mean, it sort of like bounces off my ear because like inner harmony, yeah, right. But if you think about harmony and the word, maybe somebody can look it up really quick, where it comes from, but it reminds me of the fact that, you know, in harmonics, sounds that have a resonance with one another. In harmonics, there's a sense of, well, maybe I'm speaking beyond what I actually know technically about the word.
I can just quickly read if you'd like.
Yeah, I would.
The word harmony comes from the Greek word harmonia, which means joint, agreement, concord. It comes from the verb harmonzo, which means fit together, join. The word harmony was first used in its current metaphorical sense, which is the combination of parts or related things to form a consistent whole or an agreement. For example, in music, harmony means a combination of tones fusing in way. The word harmony comes into English via Latin harmonia. In Greek mythology, Harmonia was the goddess of harmony and concord.
Okay, well, perhaps calling on that goddess today to help us out. And things that go together in music, if you play a fifth, you get a certain kind of feeling from it. If you play a major chord, major chords are bright, minor chords a little more melancholy. And interestingly, we feel the subtleties. When things are discordant, then we feel out of place. And really, yoga is about the meaning of yoga, although nowadays it's come to mean more about asanas, meaning there are bodily exercises that are recommended to keep one's body limber enough so you can sit for longer periods of time and perform various kinds of meditation. Right, Mayank? He's a yoga teacher.
That is correct. Yeah, it does help to meditate.
Although in the Yoga Sutras, isn't it? Patanjali Muni, he's talking about yoga meditations. Very little mention of the asanas. And the explanation of yoga, going back to its root, which is, you've probably noticed what I like to do with words. Like, what are we talking about here? Let's define the terms. It comes from Sanskrit yuj, which means to connect. And it's very similar to harmony, parts that go together. We, as conscious beings, go together well with conscious beings. We don't go so well together with matter. And I had been listening to a talk by my teacher a while back, and he was talking about when a conscious being mixes with the material elements, there's always some discord or disharmony. And he gave an example that I was thinking about while I was at the airport, and I could see out the window and the planes taking off, that he said, just like our modern day airplanes, they're very convenient, but we always feel a little bit of sense of anxiety because they could crash at any minute. They don't crash that much, actually, but they could. And that's why we have all this safety preparation when you get on the plane and so forth, because matter at any time can do odd things, and things that seem out of place with our nature. We would like things not to crash and burn, right? Say yes, please do. So how to be in harmony, how to make the parts fit together, how do we feel more in tune with, again, sounds cliche, but our higher self, which is distinct from the fact that distinct from our bodies and even our minds. And what are the benefits of that? Just sort of reviewing what the title is of today's program. There is a sense of gratitude that comes from a spiritual practice, which we'll go into a little more. You've heard me talk about it previously, and we've discussed it together, but there's so much more to be said about it. It's really an important attitude. What is it, and where does it come from? There's also how to appreciate or even love other beings, even ones that don't look like us. We may feel alarmed or scared when we see somebody that looks slightly different. I'm not just talking about humans, because every human's different, but there are other species as well. And sometimes one species doesn't appreciate another. I used to watch movies when I was a kid about ants, and one kind of ant would fight another tribe of ants to the death because they were slightly different. It's like, come on, guys, we're all ants here. Can't you just get along? Can't we all just get along? Rodney King. So there's a way in which the ancient sages who came together to discuss what is real spiritual practice had this sense that harmonizing with other living beings beyond what role they're playing as a physical body, beyond what they look like, is one of the symptoms of somebody who's advancing spiritually. And then also self-love. What is real self-love? How do we love ourselves? Well, first we have to know what the real self is. That's what the sages, there was a huge conference that took place 5,000 years ago, according to the Vedas, these ancient wisdom literatures. And the best of sages got together in a forest, good place for a conference, right? And they discussed what's the best thing you can do for yourself and what's the best thing you can do for all other beings. What a great conference, right? And so they came up with some conclusions. And one of them is, first, know who you are, know what your self is before you try to do good, because it may be slightly misplaced if you put all your energy into something that you're not. So those are a few thoughts as a preamble to what we're discussing today, how to get more in harmony with who we are. And once we know who we are, what kinds of practices, which are universal practices anyone can do and feel for themselves, no matter what culture one comes from, where you'll feel this direct connection to our original source, which is one of the other meanings of yoga, is connecting with our original source. In the book called the Sri Upanishad, the Upanishads are the ancient literatures that talk about the difference between us and our bodies and how we're transcendent beings, but we're ensconced in matter right now. Starts off by describing our source. And the verse says, uses the word over and over again, Purnam. Our source is complete. And we're emanations from that complete whole, and therefore we're complete in ourselves. But we're complete when we connect with our complete whole, because we're the parts and not the whole. And so yoga means that the parts learn how to harmonize with the whole and be connected to the whole. Extensive preface. So let's, I don't know how this is going to go because I'm not on my usual equipment, as you can probably tell, and how the sound will be, but maybe you can let me know, JM, how this sounds. I'm going to try turning on my live performance audio, and I'm going to play just some background music, and then we can just do what we have done frequently, which is to start with a little meditation or introspection, as I like to call it, because it sounds more generic. Are you ready? Unable to start live performance audio. Okay, it doesn't work here for some reason. So I don't know why, but I'm not going to take time to figure it out because it's your time. So please, everyone, just sit up a little straighter than you were a second ago. Try closing your eyes. And just notice that you're alive and breathing, alive and kicking. And as you're breathing, and I want to recommend this as a way to be alone in a crowd. I got unceremoniously thrown onto an airplane to get to Toronto, where I am now. And I was just mixed into a large canister full of people. And I thought how to be centered in this. And I closed my eyes and I brought my attention inwardly. So if you could do it on a crowded airplane with people who have been delayed for 2 days and most of them disturbed, frustrated, and angry, you can do it anywhere. So try now and breathe and keep an alert mind. And I'll demonstrate what I did on the airplane to bring my mind to a focused point. This in Sanskrit is called tasmat ekena manasa. And that is to bring your mind to one point. And the way it's mentioned in the ancient wisdom literature is shrotavya kirtitavyascha, which means use a mantra. And a mantra can, if you're in a big crowded place, you can use it in your mind. So as you're alert but relaxed, bring the syllables R-A-M-A into your mind, pronounce Rama, and try counting on your fingers and see if you can stay focused on saying this mantra 10 times in your mind. And wherever your mind goes, bring it back to the word Rama. And just go ahead and start and do it as slow or as fast as you wish with the syllables. The way I've been doing it is about this fast. Rama, Rama. So see if you can do that 10 times and bring your mind back to the mantra, the internal mantra that you're saying in your mind, and see the 2 syllables. And we'll see you in about 1 minute. Okay. And now let's try saying it out loud behind muted mics 3 times. And just notice the difference between doing it mentally and with your vocal cords. Rama, Ramam, Ramam. And bring your awareness back to your breath. And then you can rub your hands together, open your eyes, and come back into the room. Welcome back. So one of the systems of meditation is to focus the mind on a mantra, the syllables of the mantra. It's like a code. Somebody gives you an important code, you take it and you open it and you get entryway into some special realm. So this is the way the ancient teachers described the mantra. And it's able to help one rise above the mind and come to clarity. How did it go for any of you doing that mentally, saying the mantra? Kennedy said, so calming, like we're relaxing. I'm taking away JM's job. Go ahead, JM.
Kennedy said, so calming, like relaxing in warm water.
Hmm.
Any other reflections?
Nurali's already got a question.
Yeah, she does have a question. So I can read Riya's question. How do you harmonize with others who we are meaning as Prakriti, body, mind, nature, habits, likes and dislikes? How you can be connected with God all the time?
Wow. Bring us right to the point, why don't you, Nurali? Harmonizing with others. Okay, well, those are good. That's also a good preamble, because I think, Jam, you keep score and see if I come close to answering these questions. Or Nurali, you keep score, because you asked the question, and let's see how we do. Any other thoughts about the meditation? Just the use of mantra.
Debbie says, I'm a child of Sesame Street. So I was picturing the syllables coming out like they taught us new words in the show. Sesame Street is my higher power.
Nice.
And Nirali said, it brings awareness to now. And Mayank says, silent focus on mantra syllables seemed very helpful technique to meditate in crowded places.
Yes. Yeah, so you can try that. Thank you for the feedback, everybody.
Yeah.
Now let's go to a few slides.
Yeah,
yes.
At least for me, one thing I thought was, when I was mentally repeating the syllable, and when I was actually saying it out loud, when saying it out loud, I had additional help, I thought, to stay focused on the mantra. So that is one thing which I observed.
It's nice to see that. And then if you can experiment with it and then remember the experience and then try for it on a regular basis, for instance, every day, do the mantra for some time, start to notice the effects. And Debbie agreed with you, or with somebody. She's in harmony with everything, whatever is said. Okay, jam to the slides. Yeah, agreement is the state of yoga. I agree. So let's go on. This is a series on inner harmony. And today, especially in the title, was mentioned the word transformation. And transformation means, according to the dictionary, to change in character or condition. So it's not so easy to change one's character. You may have noticed that if you go to a seminar and get really absorbed over 3 days, then you come home and everyone says, well, you're really fanatical now. It's because you just came out of a seminar. And yeah, maybe you're excited about a new way of thinking, of working, new habits. But have you ever found that the world has a way of pulling you back in to other habit patterns? And then It may happen by such slight degrees that you don't even notice. And then several months or a year later, you find yourself, oh, I'm back where I started from. What happened to the ideas? So transformation takes place in many different ways. But according to the wisdom literatures, it should be substantial, and we should start with our core. Inward transformation leads to transformation in all other areas of our lives. Like when a tree matures and it's able to give fruits and so forth, it's a systemic change that takes place. And it's obvious by the symptoms, which is the fruit. So according to the ancient sages, transformation of our spirit, our minds, our intelligence takes place with some practice, and it's also noticeable in the way that we interact with the world. Transformation, to change in character or condition. And of course, transformation can be negative or positive, right? We can be transformed. Is it necessarily a positive word, or can it be also pejorative? Transformation. Generally, we say, I think, it seems to me, transformation seems like you bettered yourself in some way, but I don't think it's absolute. We can be transformed one way or another. One point that's important is that we can transform. We can change our form, our character, our condition. And if we become aware of that and we work towards it in proper ways by knowledge and practice, then we can aim for something higher and come to a higher level. Okay, let's see what else we have in store. So Bhakti Yoga, let's say what it means. Bhakti Yoga transforms our character and condition. The word Bhakti comes from a word in Sanskrit, Bhaj, B-H-A-J. Bhaj means to focus one's attention on what's most valuable and to give one's heart to it. Give your heart, your mind, your activities to what's most valuable. So let's come back in the Zoom room for a second. I know this might be a tricky question, but what's most valuable, would you say, in your life? If someone wakes you up at 1 o'clock in the morning tomorrow and says, what's most valuable to you? Had you thought it out? Could you say in an articulate way what's most valuable?
Rajesh says life itself. Sheila says at 1 a.m., maybe sleep.
Well, that's why I picked 1 a.m. because this is an interesting point. From different perspectives, are different in different contexts. We may say something's more valuable than the other. When we're hungry, we might say, well, food's the most important. When we're sleepy, we might say sleep. And I went to visit some friends a long time ago, and I'm not a night person. I don't stay up that late usually, but they stayed up late and I felt socially obligated to talk to them. And then I got up at my usual time the next morning, which is early-ish. And then the next day when I was talking to him, I could only think, I wish I could go have a little snooze here because it seems so dire. So it's an important point. Some of our bodily functions, we can say from moment to moment, are most important, but that's why Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that you should keep all those things in balance. Try to live a balanced life in your senses, because if you don't, then they'll pull on you in inordinate ways. That's why yogis avoid intoxication, because they don't want to be dependent on a chemical, and if they don't have it, they can't function properly and so forth. And also they get enough sleep, but not too much and not too little, and so forth. So then, asking the question, what's most valuable? Were there more posts there, JM?
Yeah, so there are a few more things which came back. Debbie said, let me go back to bed. Nirali said, realization. And then Kennedy said, integrity and authenticity. And Debbie said, my sanity.
Yeah, so these are all important. And as I mentioned before, the sages at a forest named Naimisharanya is a place, interestingly in Sanskrit, it means the place where nobody blinks. They don't move their eyelids. And what is the meaning of that? So they were so intent on the topic that they never closed their eyes. Even when they were listening, they didn't blink because they didn't want to miss anything, seeing anything, taking it all in. That's how intent they were on finding out what the spiritual practices were. So we can look at what's most important to us. And if we have a clearer idea about what's the highest value in life, Kennedy said integrity, authenticity, what makes us whole? Integrity means wholeness. What makes us authentic comes from the word author. The author means the doer, the person who's responsible for everything. Comes back to you. These are foundational questions to ask. Who are we really? And what kind of transformation do we want to make? So Yenatma suprasidati. This is one of the conclusions of the sages. Okay, so what is it that actually satisfies the self? Not satisfies the belly, because I can be hungry and eat, and then I'm hungry again later, but it satisfies the self. So I feel happy no matter what the external circumstances are. This is in the Gita, Bhagavad Gita also, this is true integrity, and also it's a state that we come to when we become more and more conscious. We transform our consciousness so we're not dependent on the circumstances of our life. If you have a hard pillow or whatever, you're still going to be okay. If you don't have all the amenities in life, some of the yogis, they don't collect things because they really don't need them. Other great, very highly conscious people are mentioned in the ancient wisdom literatures, like a king named Ambarish. He had unlimited wealth in that context, and he used it all for a higher purpose. So he was also counted amongst the greatest of conscious yogis. So it's not a matter of what you have or don't have, but your relationship with it. JM, let's see another slide. So this is a paradigm we've discussed before, but it's worth remembering when we talk about transformation. And we are, according to the Bhagavad Gita, conditioned by the three material modes. So if you find yourself being pushed around or affected, there's a explanation for this in the Bhagavad Gita, that there are these three all-powerful forces in the environment of this world: tamas, sattva, rajas. Actually, they're out of order here, but they go in order that sattva is the highest, and you can tell by the light, or you can just look at it like this. It's fine because it's in the middle. And rajas says here energetic mind, but energetic mind is described more as chasing after phantoms and never quite getting anywhere, but always being eager, energized to go somewhere else and become something else. Sattva means that I'm aware of what I am already, so I don't have to chase anything. I'm fully satisfied with my authentic self. And I feel integrity because I feel whole. And tamas means dull mind, dull in the sense that I've forgotten everything. In fact, there's a mantra from one of the oldest books in the world, and it says, Om Ajnana Timirandasya. It's a preamble that sometimes teachers say when they're about to speak on a topic, Om Ajnana Timirandasya, which means I was born into darkness. So if you think about it for a minute, all of us just woke up in a body somewhere. Do you remember that? Maybe not so much. I woke up in a body in Walnut Creek, California, 1956. All of a sudden it's like, okay, here's your new here's your new family. Get used to it. And this is a sense of Om Jnana Timirandasya that I don't know where I came from. I don't know how I got here. I just know here I am again. And then there's looming death, that there's a short cycle on this. So I try to make the most of it, what I can right now. So this is what the ancient Vedas say. Vedas means books of knowledge, wisdom literatures, I call it. We're born without clarity, like where did I come from? Who am I? And so forth. And then we get conditioned by these modes which are ever mixing. And our states of consciousness, states of mind are all intertwined with these three modalities of nature, sattva, rajas, and tamas. And you see that little figure down there, like a puppet? Practically literal in how the Bhagavad Gita and other of the Vedas describe our position of conditioning. The tongue says to name an animal, somebody name an animal. That's an easy one, right? Zebra. Okay, I like the zebra. Zebras, they eat grass, right? Anybody have a zebra? Not so much. They're not really popular in America. So zebras, they have a certain kind of food they like. It's just natural. Dogs, they mark their territory. Once you take a dog out for a walk, they can smell everything, and they smell, oh yeah, another dog's been here, but I'm going to tag this place myself. They have this territorial mode. If you tell them, listen, just don't get into all this tagging stuff today, okay? Let's just go out, be grateful that we're alive, and walk around. What do you say? And look, not so much. They'll go for it. This is observable that everybody has a set of sense objects. Every species has a habit pattern that's built in, and humans have that too. But humans have a superior function of the brain, or a superior functioning brain, by which we can lift up to a higher level. We can see causality and say, oh, wait a minute, when I do this, this happens, and I can do more. And according to the ancient Vedas, that say that once you come to human life, atata brahma jignasa, now you can rise above all the conditioning that you feel built in. Because, and now this may sound alarming, I know there's a family show, so try to take it with a little sobriety, but there's a way in which the Bhagavad Gita and other wisdom literatures have said that we as spiritual conscious beings have been in many other different kinds of bodies. This is not our only body. We've made all these stopovers, so a lot of the conditioning from our previous bodies experiences we've had are still there in our subconscious mind when we come into this particular body. And it's the same with all species and beings. Little birds, when I put on my fountain in my backyard, it's right next to my window, the birds take it as a free spa, and they line up like there's a little airport landing strip. There's a tree across my yard, and they all line up there, and then they take turns coming down to take a free bath in the fountain. And they are observably frightened when I come anywhere near them. They think you're going to kill me. And how'd they figure that? They didn't go to some little bird school where they had a little PowerPoint presentation about humans. You stay away from these guys. They just know it. And there's this sense, potentially Muni says, we're conditioned with these impulses from various lives, the strongest of which is that we have to protect ourselves from death because we have a physical body and we could lose it. And there's the pain of that. This all goes to the conditioning. And it's conditioning by what? The three modalities that mix with everything. So one of the objectives of Bhakti Yoga is to become unconditioned. In fact, sometimes the conditioning is described as being tied by rope. Those modalities I talked about, they're also called gunas. This will be on the test, by the way, so take good notes. This is guna, it's spelled Gunas. Guna. Guna also has several meanings. One of them is rope. And so sometimes the process of bhakti yoga is described as the sword that cuts the rope of conditioning. So it can be cut. It says, Vidyate hridaya grantish, chidyante sarva samshaya. So there's a way that one of the ancient literatures makes this proclamation. Vidyate hridaya. Hridaya means a knot. Hridaya grantish. Vidyate means it's cut. You can cut that knot, like the Gordian knot. Nobody could undo it. And then, who was it? Alexander? He said, I can open that. And they said, yeah, right. Nobody else could. Let's see you do it. So he took his sword and he just cut it. They said, oh, we never thought of that. And so the Bhakti Yoga says, yeah, the knot's so tied up, the modalities are so tied, so the habit patterns are so ingrained in us, not just from this life, but previous lives. What do? Cut those knots. So there's a sword that you can do it with. In fact, that metaphor is brought up in many places. Yet anudyasina, karma granti nibandhanam. Must be lack of sleep. I can't remember the verse right now. Yet anudyasina yukta karma granti nibandhanam. Yes, so it gives the metaphor of a sword. So yeah, this is one of the ways of thinking about yoga. It's a sword that cuts the knots that bind us to this limited vision that we're this body, we're part of this material world. In fact, somebody showed me a video recently, and it started on the earth, and then it went outwardly into the universe, further and further and further, until we felt, or at least I felt watching the video, that I was estranged from the earth, and I felt my insignificance, because in looking back at the earth again, you couldn't even see it. It was just a speck in the universe. But then the camera comes closer and closer to the earth, and it comes back to a tree, and then it goes into the leaf of the tree, and then it goes into the cell of the leaf, the cells within the leaf, one cell, and it goes deeper into that, and then into the atoms, and then into the parts of the atoms, and so forth. And you get the same feeling either direction you go. It's unlimitedly complex, and it's not what we thought it was. And so the conception, the roles of who I am, I'm a particular kind of human, or I'm a particular kind of animal. Bhakti yoga, of course, animals generally don't do bhakti yoga, although there are some exceptions, that we're able to rise beyond this limited conception of life. Now, my teacher used to tell this story about Dr. Frog. Has anybody else met Dr. Frog before? So I'll tell the story. So there was a frog pond, and in it lived several very happy frogs. And one of them one day, hey, very good, my uncle. He found a frog emoji. So one of them one day saw one of the conveyances of the time called a bullock cart. It was a wooden cart with big wooden wheels pulled by bulls. It was coming by, or oxen, more likely. And as the frog saw this conveyance, just out of a sense of curiosity, he jumped and landed on it, jumped out of his frog pond and landed on the cart. And the cart was traveling down a road, and it took him by the ocean. Apparently they were near the ocean, but weren't aware of it. And so the frog got this free tour, and he watched in awe and wonderment as he observed the Pacific Ocean. Must have been in California somewhere. And he traveled for the day, stayed on the cart, and the owner of the cart came back on the same path, and the frog jumped back into the pond. And he had a story to tell, you can imagine, right? So he called a little conference, and one of the attendees was Dr. Frog, who was known as the smartest among all the other frogs in the pond. And this little, what everyone thought was a know-nothing, never amount to anything frog started telling about what he had seen in the Pacific Ocean. And he said, there is the largest, most inconceivable body of water that any frog could imagine. So Dr. Frog wanted to measure it. And he said, so how big is it? He said, no, it's beyond conception. You can't even imagine. I'm trying with my mind, or I'm looking for the words to describe it. So Dr. Frog, let me help you out. Is it 2 times bigger than our well? I said, no, much bigger. Dr. Frog said, okay, 5 times bigger. No, way bigger, 1,000 times bigger. And by the time he got to 10,000 times bigger than our frog pond, and the little frog rejected it, Dr. Frog, that's impossible. There is no such thing. Because his perspective was just this little frog pond. And there's a way in which, by conditioning, I get used to a small conception of life. This is my little city. I'm an American. I'm half Canadian, half whatever. It's 23andMe. It doesn't reveal the soul. It just reveals the history of the body line, what comes in the body. And I get conditioned to think I'm a particular kind of body. So Bhakti Yoga allows us to expand beyond that. In fact, humans are always trying to test those limits and go beyond limited conceptions through poetry, through art, through music. In fact, drama is historically known to try to bring one out of one's limited conception of life, bring one into a sense of being unembodied and absorbed in something beyond oneself, because we're tied down. And it's also well known that people who sometimes have out of body experiences, out of body, OOB, or near death experiences, NDE. These are well documented, that people notice, oh, yeah, I stepped out of my body. I'm not my body, I'm something else, so forth. Everyone's heard of that. So there is a perspective that's beyond just the limited mind, the limited conception that I belong to this body, I belong to this particular family, nation, even a planet. We're not even, according to the Vedas, part of this universe, because this universe is made all of matter, whereas we're conscious. We belong to a different environment. Boy, am I rambling today. It must be that liminal consciousness that I'm in because of flying all night with no rest. So let's see. So far, there's some really practical points we're coming to, and it's 12:45. So let's see. A couple of comments, and you keep me on track, okay, JM, so I can finish the rest of the slides. But I just want to take a breath and see if anybody can give a reflection. Means anything you heard so far that resonated, or any question you have that you think will expand the conversation.
Yeah, you can unmute yourself and ask questions, or please post the questions or reflection in the chat box.
You don't have to do it right away. You can just think about it for the next few seconds.
One of them is, and yes, Kennedy says not all at once, please, one at a time. Charles said regarding 23andMe and maybe 3 generations if we are lucky, but nothing about our original source. And, yeah. And Kennedy said, and also has a disclaimer about being less than 50% accurate.
Is that right? Oh, okay. That's a pretty high percentage. JM, show me the next slides, because I'm not at all confident that I'm going to stay within time, and I want to get to a few points.
Sure. I'll just make a short announcement. It's coming up. Yep. Next stop, the mantra zone. So we have that today. Today evening at 6:30 p.m. If you are in and around Bay Area, Palo Alto, please do come by. We'll have mantra music, meditation, dinner, and some wisdom discussion. So yeah, Vaish is in the picture. He'll be there in spirit, but we do have others who will be together. So looking forward to meeting you. I'll post the link shortly. That, let me just go back to the, yeah.
So the Bhakti is a particular description of the way to attain yoga or connection with our source. And I chose the hot air balloon because of the sense of perspective that one gets from rising straight up in a hot air balloon and rising above the clouds. Of course, you have that in an airplane too. But in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that when you practice, you add the Bhakti Yoga into your life, then you'll notice that you naturally rise above the modalities, the three modalities that I described. Mam chayo vyavicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samachijaitan brahma bhuyaya kolte. It says, does the Gita, that if you add this in and do it on a regular basis, the practice of bhakti yoga, then you naturally rise above the three modalities. And you come to what's called Brahman, or a sense of yourself as being spiritual and awareness of your spiritual source. And we've discussed this before, but some of the symptoms of that are happiness. Happiness that's not dependent on anything else. And also a universal vision, that is seeing how everything's interrelated. When we see that things are interrelated, there's a way we're more careful about how we deal with others. And we know that we're all related to them and we're all interrelated, interdependent and so forth. And there's also a noticeable decrease in the kind of desires that pinch us. You want to do one thing, but the desire pinches you and says, no, do this other thing. This is part of the conditioning that Krishna mentions in the Bhagavad Gita that harasses us, that moves us against our will in various directions, doing things that we didn't want to do. And so we become free from that. That's that sense of the knot being cut, and we're becoming free. So this is benefit-based marketing I'm giving here. What are the benefits to practicing Bhakti Yoga? Let's see another slide. So there are 9 main processes in Bhakti. And you're going to be so amazed, I hope. I shouldn't build expectations so high, but I think they couldn't be high enough. That there's 2 processes that you can begin with that lead to success in Bhakti Yoga. And they're translated in English as hearing and chanting. In Sanskrit, they're called Shravanam and Kirtanam. So Shravanam uses the ear. And it's an amazing phenomenon that human beings can learn by listening. We have classrooms, and what do you do in a classroom? You just go in there and listen. You listen to somebody who knows more than you do, hopefully, and hopefully that you listen, and hopefully they know more. And just by listening, you come to a higher level of understanding something. You gain knowledge, wisdom, or know-how in performing some task. So hearing, this is the first step. If you hear about it, then you can start the transformation. So now it's a question of what are you hearing? What do you put in your ears? So Bhakti Yogis, this is the entry step into the process of Bhakti Yoga, is to hear. So sometimes people say, well, what should I hear? So there's a distinction made between material sound and spiritual sound. And the material sound, of course, is necessary to some degree because we have to interact with the material world. So we have to have some know-how. For instance, someone may say, what's the security code? Now, don't tell me. No, don't put it in the chat box. What's the security code on your credit card? I have to know that. I have to keep it safe and everything. That's material knowledge, but it's necessary for us to buy things and move around the world because we need to tap on something to pay for things. And then there's another kind of knowledge, which is knowledge of our real identity, our authentic self. And that's described in many places in, for instance, the book called Srimad Bhagavatam. And an example of that came up while I was traveling. Because I was kindred with many other souls who are in Air Canada and who were stranded for 2 whole days in the San Francisco airport, I noticed that there was a camaraderie that developed. People started talking to one another, commiserating. Some people became the leader on the second day of a revolt against the airline, demanding this and that. We're going to call the press and so forth. And there was a little community forming, being interesting for a sociological study. And in the Bhagavatam, there's a description of how we come into one life and we assume it's the all in all. But the teacher in that case is talking about how, no, it's more like you came into an inn and you sat down with some friends and you developed a camaraderie over some libation, and then you got up and went your different ways. And I saw that in the lounge too. Everyone got on, everyone felt like, hey, we're together. If it had gone one more day, we would have been best friends, everybody. But then everyone got off and they went on in their different directions. We'll never see most of them again. Maybe on the return flight or something like that, some will come back at the same time. But they described how, this is in the way of hearing about what's our existential situations. Well, I take this planet as the all in all. This is my home. I take my family or my particular nation. I defend the flag. I'll die for it. And then I have a particular family, 23andMe. I don't even know what the mixture is. And Charles told us it's 50% accurate only. Kind of a mystery how we got here in the first place. So why do I identify with all these things? And I'm not advocating for chaos or randomness or disregarding family. All I'm just saying is there's a higher vision and it's developed by hearing a higher perspective. In fact, I remember during the beginning of the pandemic, when everyone was, not everyone, but people collectively, everyone added their own little contribution of anxiety to the whole situation. I could say everyone was freaking out. Just the admonition that this too will pass. I remember a few well-spoken people came on the news or whatever, and they just said, oh, this too will pass. And everyone's like, oh, it will? Okay, I think we'll be all right. You hear it, and then you develop a higher perspective. So Bhakti yogis, they hear profound wisdom about not just that we're not this body, but also that we have a connection to a higher reality. And there, for instance, in the Bhagavatam, there's many poetical verses and there's stories nested within stories. And just by submissively hearing those, listening, we start to develop wisdom and a perspective that's noticeable, that the knot that ties me to all these anxieties that I feel bound to act in a certain way and I feel part of this world, that they start to loosen, or even they're at a certain point, they're cut. And then chanting means whatever you heard, then you repeat it. Instead of just speaking random words, like if you listen to the 24-hour news cycle, when there's a moment of silence with your friend, with your spouse, with your family, and then you want to say something or you meet all you'll do is just bring up what happened on the news. And that's not very nice, really. It's just, why? Do I have a filter on that? It's like, why did you even bring it up? Does it help? So there's also very deliberate ways in which to transmit the kinds of wisdom that you've gained, and there are mantras which are naturally uplifting, and you can repeat those. So it uses the ear and the tongue, and that's how you start Bhakti Yoga. Hear from the wisdom literatures, hear the mantras, hear your own tongue repeating what you heard, and then speaking it, using your tongue to make transcendental vibration. It's a funny way of saying it, but I like it. That's why we say keep the transcendental vibration going. Quick, next slide. I'm almost out of time. So I just got this from a colleague the other day because he was writing some posts, and I really liked what he said about should versus is. And this idea that things should be like this, it should have been like that. Try for a day, don't take any shoulds. Just see what is. It should have been like that. You should have been on time. I should have been there. I should be smarter. Forget it. Just cross off should and just say, here's what is. Not advocating for not being progressive or developing oneself. I'm just saying, when you're accepting of the way things go, you start to understand that the world actually isn't under our control. And it's not that bad when I don't try to control it and own it. As soon as I try to control and own everything, then it seems bad because it's never going to go my way, right? And so if you take is rather than should, your mental well-being naturally adjusts. I did it over the last 2 days being stranded in the airport. I didn't mind. I was like, I'm fine here, I'm fine there. I don't care if the flight comes or not. They fix the plane. And I felt like I got a lot done just being there and observing. And I went on with my Shravanam Kirtanam, hearing and chanting, even in the airport lobby. Okay, let's go to the next one with 2 minutes left. The next is about gratitude as a symptom of one who sees reality. Reality is that there are abundant gifts flowing to us at every second. Because of my shoulds, it should be like that, should have been like that, I don't see them. But when I become aware of the fact that I'm being maintained in amazing ways at every second, and I'm being given intelligence, and then I can transform myself, start to realize there's order in the universe, goes back to that concept of logos, and all the ologies of the world is observable, or we can study it and put it into categories because there's order here. And where does order come from? Intelligence. And where does intelligence come from? A person. And in Bhakti Yoga, we have gratitude because we realize all of this facility is intentional. And whatever happens to us is intentional. Go ahead. That's your job. Keep me moving. Okay, so how to love yourself. Realize that you're part of the whole. And see that you're not your body, but you're actually an ever-existing conscious entity. And when we become enamored of what we actually are, then we appreciate what our position is in the world. We don't have to change externally to become something else because we realize our authenticity, or we embrace authenticity, and this is who I am. I'm a soul. And the last slide is how to love others. I chose this picture because it shows a thoughtful person on the right and many species of life, because oftentimes we think love others just means humans, but it means all living beings. And why? Because in yoga, the state of yoga or union, there's this sense that we're all interconnected. And if you look a little bug sometime, I found one the other day. It was the smallest bug I think I've ever seen. And somehow he ended up on my shirt. So I got a little piece of cloth and I said, here, little fella, why don't you jump on here? I'll take you to a tree. I don't think you're going to like my office too much because you're too green. You're not going to fit in here. And I looked at him before he left, and it was the most beautiful little green bug. And he looked at me, had little eyes, and I was thinking, yeah, there's a little being in there just like me. He's just got a slightly different body. I mean, it's a little more than slightly, but I felt a kind of union with that little bug. And there's a way that the Bhagavad Gita describes a wise person. I'm not a wise person, by the way. I didn't mean to connect these two ideas, but I'm just saying that a wise person is one who has this universal vision and sees that just the bodies are slightly different because of the mixing of the modes of material nature, but the soul inside is the same, and you can relate to that because we all come from the same original divine source. Om Tat Sat, 1 minute over. So grateful. Thank you very much, everyone. Next stop, it's the Mantra Zone. Highly recommend it. It's a cheery place to go to practice Bhakti Yoga. It's what takes place there. I did mention that one of the nicest parts of Bhakti Yoga is eating good food. I'm here in Toronto. There's this really famous Bhakti Yoga chef here, and he just had lunch because it's later here than back there before I came on the show. And it was just such a nice environment, harmonious environment, and the food is all spiritualized. They cook it with love and devotion and also chant mantras. And so eating becomes a conscious process, and that's what happens at the Mantra Zone also. I can't wait to get back there to the Mantra Zone. Thanks, JM, for keeping the lights on for all of us. Who is running the rest of it today?
Today, it's you.
Oh. No, I meant usually you announce somebody behind the scenes.
Yeah. Today, they had conflict, couldn't join.
Okay.
Yeah. But Kennedy has been managing the chat, so she has been very wonderful. Thank you, Kennedy, for doing that.
Yeah, thanks, Kennedy. And thanks to all of you for being there. Great to see you all. And I'll look forward to seeing you again next week, hopefully, if everything holds together.
Thank you.
KJM. Oh, there's one thought that came into my mind just before I started. I think I'll end with this. That is that there is a tradition in the high areas of the Himalayas where yogis go to be alone. There's a kind of startling experience they have sometimes when they come out of their caves from meditation and they see fellow yogis out on the path foraging. So they get a little excited about it. And it's a well-known fact that they have a ritual where they raise their arms high in the air and they call out this phrase, Hari Bol, which means, please stay on the path, keep the vibration going and everything. And it's a nice thing. Shall we try it?
Yep.
I'll start. Hari Bol.
Haribol.
Haribol. Haribol.
Thanks, everybody. See you soon.